Here we go. We're off. We're live. Hey guys, welcome back. Hey Biddle, how's it going?
Hey everybody, doing great. In the spirit of Twitch channel, maybe just let everyone know I'm back on my retro gaming kick. I got a Nintendo 64 lately,
Oh
so
wow, that's
yeah,
cool.
bringing back some old vibes.
Yeah. I saw a whole thing about stuff that was like great in the 2000s today, like on BuzzFeed or something. And it was like, this isn't really retro gaming, but it was like somebody in this person's class had asked to go outside to feed their Tamagotchi or something like that. I was just like thinking about all these old games and like things that you used to do, and I was like, simpler times back in the day. But yeah, nice. Oh, the gaming. My friend used to have a Sega that was like old school. I don't know if you guys had that. Or a dance mat. Love a bit of dance mat, or you call Dance Dance Revolution, whatever it's called. But yeah.
Now we're going way
Anyway,
back.
okay. So love, I remember having a dance mat before my friends had one, and it was like, and then I got bored with it, and then my friends got one, and then they got really good at it, and I was just like, damn, have I been practicing the whole time and hadn't like lost track of it? Oh well. So we'll get into actual content. So hey guys, so today, if you remember from last week, we were supposed to be chatting about the spot. Unfortunately, our special guest Chris was having some technical issues today, so we're just going to change the topic and have a bit of a free-fall conversation, but about CFM and about FinOps, and just kind of enjoy it. So feel free to pop things in the chat. And in general, we'll do the formal intro. So welcome everyone to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend at AWS. My name is Stephanie Gooch, and I am a commercial architect at AWS, looking at telco customers predominantly and helping them in everything CFM.
Yeah, and hey everybody, Michael Biddle. I lead our financial architecture specialist team supporting public sector. Worked with Stephanie and the optics team for the last few years, and yeah, been on a few shows here, so good to see everyone again.
Yeah, nice. And as always, please feel free to put your comments, questions in the chat, looking for anything you want to chat about today or any kind of cost optimization questions you have. And if you are looking at us later on YouTube, please feel free to like, subscribe, add a comment there if you have questions or suggestions for other episodes that you want to see coming up. So I actually also want to later on, I think I want you to explain about what you do now, because me and Bill used to work in the same team. I used to know very much what you did and work together on some projects. And now I don't really know. So I think that would be a good for a conversation. But we're going to start off with talking a bit about how we both kind of found our way into FinOps, like I'm branded today, or how CFM and kind of that kind of stuff. So Bill, do you want to kick us off and talk about your journey into this world of FinOps that we're in?
Yeah, sure. And kind of this is relevant because we get asked a lot when we engage with our customers, like what's the typical type of maybe resume or profile of someone I should look at if I'm recruiting to build out my cloud financial management team. And so I always tell folks don't necessarily think you're looking for one profile. My experience, for what it's worth, which is going to be different for everyone. If you would have asked me what the cloud was 9 years ago before I joined AWS, I would say, I don't know, something that rains. I would have to look that up. So what I did before I came to AWS was I was managing different various marketing, analytics, search engine optimization, and paid like Google search engine management campaigns for different companies. I also worked within Zillow's Realtor Premier Agent program, helping different real estate professionals get targeted exposure to different areas in their market and helping them optimize their financial campaign budgets. And so, why I think that's relevant to bring up is you see a lot of different folks come from different marketing backgrounds who are used to looking at different metrics of performance, where things are varying off of the projected hypothesis, if you will, approaching, data from a standpoint of using kind of like the old school scientific method, right? And I think that translates pretty well. Now, whether that means cloud or not, we've seen that can be ramped up. And so I came on to AWS and I started out in our customer enablement team, really helping customers work on their reserved instances and how to make use of things like Cost Explorer, and just kept building up different skills over the years to where now I lead different engagements within our public sector part of our business for how customers can get different resource architectures in place, things like right sizing instances, using spot instances to make their applications more performant, available, and cost efficient, you name it. So yeah, that's in a real quick nutshell without going too long on the tooth. You can up level a lot of those skills just by getting hands on and experimenting. But I think if you have that innate experience to really look at, metrics, mechanisms, statistics, data, and approach things from an experimental perspective, you're probably in a decent spot to start.
Yeah, definitely. Coming from the numbers point of view is a kind of a good way of looking at it. I'm going to stick on asking you stuff for a bit, and then we can jump back to me if you want. What does a day in your new role kind of look like in comparison to what you were doing before, or what's like a typical day generally?
A lot of similarity with what we did on the optics team, Steph. Whether it's commercial sector of AWS business or public sector, the fact remains that customers are looking to, most efficiently use their resources and get the best visibility to how their costs translate in their environment. AWS, like, cost governance is, not to make a bad pun, but it is very popular in the government sector as well. People want to know how they can get those viewpoints to what parts of their organization are, using the most of the project budget. And one thing you'll kind of maybe see a little different with public sector than commercial sector is, a lot of the budgets are made off of either like public grants, different sorts of tax initiatives that are approved by governments, et cetera. And so unlike maybe a commercial customer, like, someone who's one of the top 100 most downloaded iOS apps week over week, that's, loading in new customers weekly and having to scale their application to fit that. You see different constraints within the public sector area of the business, but, fact remains, we're still looking at cost optimization just from a different lens of maybe certain things within compliance, how we leverage GovCloud, which is a specialty region at AWS, and just other sorts of wrinkles.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess especially if you have those budgets that are kind of not just because I remember where I used to work, the budgets were kind of like they're not really controlled by the people that work there. It's like, I don't know, they're just like they're not really made. They weren't made up. I'm not going to say that, but I don't know where they came from. If they were arbitrary or just like, yeah, try not to spend this much. But when it comes to other people's money, especially in the government, it's a bit more. Those numbers matter, I think, probably a bit more than what we used to do. I hope they do anyway. No, that's cool. Okay, good to know. I feel like we've had a little like back. Just good to know that you do the same kind of thing now is nice. And coming back to that, what to look for in a person for a FinOps team is interesting because I had a customer the other day who I think I said this last week wants to know about how to set up and what to look for. And they're like, should I get a technical person or a non-technical person? I think that's a bit too broad of a category. I think some people get classed in technical that like it's a bit too like one or the other when it doesn't need to be. But what do you think about that? What kind of skill sets do you think people need? Not if they need to be technical or not technical. I don't mean that.
Sure. Well, yeah, and I will say you should have some either you have existing technical aptitude or you show that you have the ability to steal an Amazon leadership principle to always learn and be curious to be able to kind of build that skill set, because what you'll find a lot is paralysis by analysis in these types of conversations you have. Engineering and finance in a perfect world are very cohesive. They understand each other's side of the business with full empathy and understanding. But the reality is there are two different parts of that business because people generally have different skill sets that gravitate to those areas. So what I like to see is, ideally someone who can do a little bit of both. Not necessarily that you can launch code and write code from a technical standpoint, but can you understand the what goes into building it, like from a process standpoint, what considerations should be used, what types of things an engineer would look at in order to know if something's performant, right? So a classic example you might see in your organization is someone in finance, pulls up a cost report, or maybe they're using something like AWS Compute Optimizer, for example, and it says change your M5 8 extra large to a C5 2 extra large. And you might make the common mistake of just sending this report over and saying, here, change it. See, it says this. And what you really want, what you really want to do is also look at like, hey, if I'm coming to you with this report, I've also considered different things like what is the compute latency needs for our application? Do we have different like storage component needs that maybe might not show in this report, but I would like you to look at and investigate further so we could really debunk if there is validity to this change recommendation. Because otherwise you can kind of run into scenarios where it becomes, one person's opinion against another's, which, you see that in every industry, not just cloud financial management. So we are working with people here, and the more you can empathize and understand both sets of the situation, the better, more effective your approach will be.
Yeah, and you can just pass this on, but drilling down into the right sizing stuff, because I think that is quite a common thing that happens from my side and from also like the other developer side. I was literally on a call with someone, and I was like, oh, this is the right sizing data, but so say you have a 100 accounts and you get these right sizing recommendations or computer optimizer recommendations. How do you suggest customers target which ones to start off with when it comes to those? Like, because there'll be so many recommendations to move through things. How do you get all that information and make it into a presentable format?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a spot where you don't have necessarily like the memory data along with the CPU data and like the read write like the packet availability that's in there by default. Like, so here's an example: if you just turn on Compute Optimizer, you haven't done any sort of memory agent being installed on the machines, you have a decent set to start off with. Look at probably prioritize the ones that have the most amount of cost potential for savings, right? Start there.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the ones I like to look at are where you're using specialty instances, like something like an R5D that is really meant for when you have an intense storage need on like the local store of the instance. And then if our engine and compute optimizer is saying, maybe change that to something like instead of an R5D 4x, move it to like a C5 9x.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, I've seen more often than not those actually hold weight, whether you have the memory metric enabled or not. And like I said, the reason being is that R5D, even though R5s are memory optimized by nature, when you have that D component for storage, it was probably put up there in your environment on the front end with the intent that you needed more of the local storage than necessarily the memory piece of it.
Right.
And so it's kind of one of those where there's smoke, there might be some fire, like start with those.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, when you go back to your engineering team, come at it from the standpoint of, why we probably did an R5D in the first place, right? And align with them and see if they have memory metrics. Because there's a good chance that while they might not be installed on the local machine itself, like with
Yeah.
AWS's CloudWatch agent, that
Mm-hmm.
maybe you're pulling those metrics somewhere else and putting them in like a Grafana profile or something else that your engineering team has access to.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot more. I haven't heard about Grafana in ages, and it's come up several times recently. So I feel like if anyone wants to come on and chat about Grafana and how they're using the optimization, it might be interesting. A topic that keeps coming up. But yeah, that's a good point. You're right. Whenever to look out for those big ticket items, I think is a great suggestion.
Specialty instances, right? That's the thing,
Specialty
right?
instances,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then you can narrow down the field, and also, like you said, focus on chatting to the developers who own it and see why they make that decision, because maybe they need it. You don't know, like, just because it's cheaper to do something else doesn't mean it's right to do something else. That's a good thing to know. But the interesting as well, because another kind of aspect of that, which I would probably go for as well, is going for the accounts where you get the developers support. So if this is new, if you're welcoming yourself into the world of FinOps and you're like, okay, I have this report, I want to start, like, I don't want to, like you said, just go and yell at everybody and say, you should all save money. Go do that now. Like, go make this change. If you have developers that are trying to optimize, who are closing to a budget, go with the people that are more hungry to make those changes and see what the hurdles are that they get into or have to get over, and how they approach it so that you can learn from it. Like classic, like you said, learn to be curious. And then if you can develop like a strategy around that, then you could implement that across your other accounts and make it easier for others.
Well, the other thing that, being a finance person first myself and then kind of learning cloud as I went along to become more technical, like we
Yeah.
often make the mistake of not realizing that time is money. And
Yeah.
honestly, sometimes time, the lack of time or cost of time is more expensive than any part of your budget itself.
Mm-hmm.
You can always get more money in theory sometimes, but can you always get more time, right? And so
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest blockers that you want to solve with your teams when you're making these recommendations is, let's say all the data shows that I should make this R5D to a C5 approach. Also give them kind of the best practices, if you will, and share along with maybe how you can more easily change those, whether there's a common tag that they can change in their formation template to do all these at scale at once
Mm-hmm.
instead of cherry picking them. So anything you can do to help give them some time back to the process, man, you're going to be in a much better position.
He'll be a hero then if you give people time. Magic. And if you have just joined us, in case you're wondering, we are just me and Biddle having a chat about a kind of journeys to FinOps or the world of cloud financial management, and just some kind of tips we picked up along the way about starting out in this world. We've learned. But yeah, the time thing, sometimes I see that actually recently that we were looking at, I think it was either snapshots or volumes, and the impact it would make to get rid of all their unattached was not huge. And it's like weighing up how much time it's going to take to turn and delete something. Sometimes when it comes to those things, I am quite inclined to be like, just do it. That's my opinion. It's just because, especially if you haven't got that many, it's that compound spend. Just get rid of them, but implement something to stop you doing it in the future, like implement some kind of alert or like config rules or something you could use to remind yourself that this is happening. I think that's quite useful. But yeah, when it comes to saving like a bit of money by making one change, I was just like, if it takes 5 minutes, just do it. If it's a whole, like right sizing is a good example. There are different, these things are different way. Right sizing is going to save you a lot of money in like over time, but it's going to invest a lot of money to do that. Deleting some idle resources that you don't need, it's going to take you like 20 minutes and it's going to save you money. So and it just depends on, and I was just like, just do it, just enjoy it.
Well, on that topic, right? Like you're like a lot of folks using containers, right? Container management, it's growing every day. And you have different metrics you can use to manage that cluster automatically. And it sounds like something that's, oh yeah, why wouldn't we do that? But you'd be surprised a lot of teams, development teams, aren't using some of the automatic management features within cluster scaling, things where like, give you an example within CloudWatch, like if from all the performance testing you've done on your application, that ideally your machine should be somewhere between like 20 to 60%, CPU and maybe, 30 to 55% memory, blah, 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 right? You know what your metric profile is for success. You can make it so that in CloudWatch, there are alarms, notifications that automatically let you know when things fall out of there, right? And that's one way to just continue to stay on top of things, save time. And so that way you're knowing what that profile should look like. So in your cluster, you can put in those different metrics of where you want it to scale and automatically heal and launch more instances. You're always going to kind of have what you want as your maximum and minimum amount running your cluster in terms of number of machines, but that also helps you diversify that profile, letting it know like I can run, C5.2s, C5.4s, M5.8s, R5.2s, and get really diversified. So
yeah, it just speaks. If you zoned out, it just sounds like a robot that's having a functional problem. We're like R5 this, and it's just like numbers and letters coming out. Then and we laugh.
Yeah. Effectively one big if statement, but using some of our tools to help you with it. And shout out to the link you just put in the chat on our skill builder, AWS free skills. We talked about up leveling everyone's skills. There's a free stuff there you can go check out. We'll do a show later this season on some of the best ones to help you curate your list. But check that out.
Nice. It should be coming in the Amazon one shortly. For some reason it's been quite slow, so that link will appear at some point. But yeah, so let's think. So we got like 12 minutes. I could talk about how I got into the world of FinOps. If you think.
Great. Yeah, you have a different background. Like I said, everyone's different. That's kind of what we like to see here.
Yeah, definitely. So I came in, I mentioned before, I used to work at KPMG, DevOps engineer, then moved, did a bit of consulting, and then moved into this world of FinOps because I started a dissertation on it because I thought it was interesting and did my master's focusing on cost optimization and visualization in the cloud, which I very much enjoy. Spent a lot of weekends in the office looking for it. But yeah, that was really fun, and then got into it. And our KPMG didn't have that as an option, and we didn't have anybody really managing it apart from the finance people who were doing a great job of just doing kind of like chargeback, but it was all very manual. And so I kind of came in with my developer head on, and I was like, what are the problems? What are we trying to fix? Tried to do a lot of cost optimization, failed to do a lot of cost optimization. But my biggest win there was definitely this chargeback thing, which was building out this whole tool which collected all the data, pushed it back out, and then solved that business problem. And I remember very simply, like when it first happened, and like she had our first report that all worked. I was just so excited, such a nerd, but loved it. And coming back to like the what's good, I was when I was talking to this customer about when they were thinking about hiring somebody, should they be technical, non-technical? This statement now I don't like. I've decided that I don't really like this non-technical, technical verbatim verbiage, but was what's the problem you're trying to solve. So if you need someone to solve a kind of automation problem solving in terms of there is this big space, we need to fix this thing that something's happening, then maybe lean towards someone who's a bit more developing. If you know someone who needs to find the problem and kind of have those conversations around improving the strategy around it, then you need someone who's a bit better at that. And because you can always give, if someone can figure out what the problem is, they can give it to a developer to fix. That's easy. It's probably harder to, because people had to tell me what the problem was. If you don't like that. Oh, I've got a question. Should I throw this up now? So, okay. That's from Bryce. Is there anything that surprised you in your journey that you weren't expecting about cloud computing and cost optimization? Do you want to go for that first?
Yeah, sure. I wasn't expecting that when I went into it that there would be as many people who weren't sure of what to do with it as I was when I first started. Like, I think what that means is we're in such a new groundbreaking industry, like kind of over the last, 13, 14 years, or how long cloud's kind of been out there. Um, and so with that, right, when you're kind of in an area of what I call like chaos, there presents a lot of opportunities to rise above the fray and become an early like village leader of sorts, if you will. So what I
Yeah,
learned and what surprised me along the way really quickly is like you don't necessarily need to know 100% of everything to be successful, but you just need to kind of know probably like 10 or 20% more than the collective other people around you to really start making progress that can continue to build on itself as you start to really unblock yourselves along the way. Like what really fascinated me was there's so many times where it wasn't necessarily all the steps ahead of us or the group that blocked us, but it was like just the first thing in front of us. And so if we could
right.
get someone who could maybe figure out 15 or 20% of unblocking that very next step in front of us, and all of a sudden the rest of the path started to become clear.
Okay.
And I think that's my takeaway is like you'd be surprised, leveraging the rest of your organization. If you don't know the answer, you can probably get collective pieces from others to really build it. And so if you can have a good eye for spotting who's got talent where and can help you kind of aggregate that along the way, I think you're probably going to be someone that can make a lot of change in your projects.
Yeah, definitely. That's a nice answer. So my big thing, and I think I've already kind of mentioned this, you could probably tell from like the other things I was saying before, is my biggest surprise, especially in terms of like cost, is people aren't that really fussed about saving money. And I think that's because I'm really frugal. Well, the classic, we're trying to tick them all off in this call. How many Amazon principles can we get through values? But yeah, when it comes to stuff, I'll always be like a way to like, kind of in general life, I'll always be quite aware of costs. But when I was at my other company and I was saying like, we could save like this much money, people just they weren't that excited about it. And I was always just like, but we could do this. And I think one thing learning over the time is understanding, okay, so writing down a number on a piece of paper to people who work in one of the big four, like one of the big companies in the world, that's not a big number to them just because it's a big number to you. And you have to take it, similar to what Chris was saying last week, you have to turn it into something that makes sense to other people. And that's something that I've had to learn as a skill. So it's not just, I mean, one thing we did do is a very jokey way of doing it. But when I was trying to explain how much money we'd saved in like a presentation, we turned it into like bottles of beer. And I think it was like the same as a first edition Harry Potter was like the things that I was able to like jokingly do that. That's obviously a very silly way of doing it. But if you're trying to, if you're like us and you do care about optimization, it's what's important to the other people, I think is a really good thing to aim for. And transferring it not just about money in the page, but it's about how is it going to affect the application, how is it going to affect your overall look, how you look to your managers, how you look to the business, stuff like that. But I think that's quite a nice thing that I've learned or wasn't expecting.
Well, your story right there reminded me of an old story in sales, like back in my old sales life. It's like, don't sell out of your own pocket, right? Like you might come through saying, oh, it's $1 million. It sounds really expensive. And to that organization, it's like,
No.
that's nothing, guy. That's like 5 minutes of me running on this. So
Yeah.
learn what is, like you said, the perspective of the parties you're working with.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. We've got another one. I think it's from Alex. So what? It's definitely from Alex, as it says Jarl. So I don't want to say Jarls, but what is your favorite way to continuously learn and keep up to date? I can't do it because I do a bad American accent. So apologies. What's your favorite way, Biddle?
Yeah, right. And the effort of always learn and be curious here. I read a lot, straight up. I've that show Cheers back in the day, that bartender Cliff Clavin, he like knew all the random facts. Like
Yeah.
I'm like a human Wikipedia at times. So I like to just read a lot. And in terms of how do I kind of like stay updated on the technical knowledge, all of like the different 15 to 30-minute quick build labs that we put out, around different parts of Amazon and AWS. Like there's one that's like how to build your Spot instance auto scaling group, and you can like replicate it in 15, 20 minutes and tear it down under a free tier. Like those have been the best ways for me to stay on top of new things in
Mhm.
different ways, because they're really built in mind for someone who like isn't an automation engineer, like to walk along the steps and do it. And so that's my recommendation. All those quick labs, quick starts, if you Google those on AWS, you'll see a lot that you can kind of quickly try out and tear down. Pretty good start.
Nice. I was trying to think I think I'm not great at. I like reading blogs when it's about stuff that I want to learn about, like very specifically. I hunt them out. I do check on the insight stuff that comes out, but the best way that I learn is I like having. I really struggle if it's like, oh, just go and like containers and stuff is a good one. If I don't have a reason to learn about it, then I won't. It sounds really lazy, but I won't if I don't have a goal in mind or something to build. It's the same way as I learn coding when I learn Python. If I don't have anything to do with it, then it's really hard to like get your hands in it because you're just kind of doing it for the sake of doing it. So things like when I was trying to learn Python and I did Code Academy, I don't know if you guys have that, but it was like fine. And then you kind of got into it, but you're like, I'm just making a weird maths equation that I don't care about. But then when my old manager, shout out Matt Davey, I don't know if he ever watches this show, but he was like, I had an idea to build this thing that went into it, like set something up in all of our accounts. And I was like, would this be like a thing that I would like write code for? And he was like, yeah, I'll show you how to start. And he showed me the basics. And then it like progressed, and I would spend hours writing stuff that didn't take hours to write and like learning, get my hands dirty. And then eventually hours turned into like minutes, and then it just became like stuff that I could just pull and be able to use. So my way of staying up to date is if there's a new service that I care about how to optimize, especially going in and getting my hands dirty, kind of like the labs and like building with it. That's the best way. Otherwise I had no idea how to use it. That's a good one.
Yeah, focus on the right? Like, I think what I took out of that, and an old school saying is like the value's in the process. Like, of course, there's a
Yeah,
value in the outcome, but the value's in the process. So, like, maybe you built some piece of crap application that really doesn't do anything and just says hi. The process of you doing that is
yeah.
way more valuable than what you had going into it.
Yeah, definitely. I spent the first lockdown, spent a lot of time developing an Alexa skill to read data from the code. I don't know if she's gonna, no, she didn't hear that. She's not gonna pipe up. But yeah, that was so like learning about things like DynamoDB and stuff I hadn't used before on Alexa, and like getting in and messing around. But that was super fun. All right, I got another one. So in the months since reInvent, what has been some of the newest announcements that you have seen making an impact? So I have done so many reInvent recaps. I'm going to be doing 5 in total. I had last year's one, this show. We had this show, just like a lot of them. I've got a blog coming out, and then I'm done with reInvent. So I feel like I know the announcements well. But what one has been making an impact? What have you seen? Have you seen anyone taking advantage of anything yet?
Um, so we were going to talk about one of them today. We'll come back to it later in the season about some of
Okay.
the Spot instance like profiler and risk assessment, right? Like that's been a topic that a lot of our customers have asked about. Give us more intelligence around launching Spot. So I'll save some of that for later in the season, but we also announced at reInvent some more free skill building. So on the topic of us learning here, like I said, go back to AWS Skill Builder. That link we put in the comments, you'll see that we've robusted that library quite a bit. And so yeah, I mean, if you've ever found yourself in a spot where you're like, oh man, like we should really be taught this, or someone should come in and learn it to us, like, dude, just go read it. We put it up there. We hired so many people to go build this. Like, come back and give us some feedback on what you think's missing.
Go check it out. Yeah, I'm trying to think if I've seen anyone take the big ones. I think one might be the intelligent tiering new tier, the new instant access retrieval one, because that's something that you don't have to do anything for. So if you're already using intelligent tiering, you're going to get that. I think it's 68% saving in comparison to instant access. So it's a real. People are just seeing that. Oh my phone. Close my chime. People are really seeing that already. We must almost be at time. I was chatting. I didn't even realize what the time was. But yeah, so I would say, just as a shout, then if you haven't seen instant access retrieval on your intelligent tiering, go look at Cost Explorer, see if you've had some savings in your S3. Be nice to check out. So that is all from us this week. Thank you for the questions. Always appreciate them. Next week, we are back with, the KPI dashboard. So this is a new thing in the well-architected labs. We're going to have a bit of a demo of that with Aaron. Really excited to kind of see this and see it in front. And Alex will be co-hosting with me, help design some of it. So very cool to get those two on. So yeah, have a good week, everybody, and we'll see you next time.